I changed the diapers, paid the bills, and calmed the crying kids 3 times in a row. My daughter-in-law disappeared after every birth. The night she announced she was pregnant for the 4th time, the family demanded another $280,000. The next morning, the house was empty. On the table was a single envelope. Inside was something they never saw coming. My name is Margaret Doyle. I am 62 years old, a widow, and I live in what used to be my quiet house in Pine Hollow, Colorado. For 40 years, my life was built on the predictable, satisfying logic of numbers. I was an internal accountant for Northwind Logistics, and I balanced ledgers to the cent. My retirement was supposed to be quiet. It was not. My son, Caleb, is 35. He works in real estate, a vague, risky field he calls debt leverage, which, as far as I can tell, means using other people's money to float his own ambitions. His wife, Aubrey Lane, is 31. She is beautiful, sharp, and blessed with a voice that can sell sand in a desert. She is always just about to land the next big opportunity. And then there are the children. Owen is 7, Ruby is 5, Nate is 3. They are sleeping down the hall, in rooms I painted, in beds I bought. They are my grandchildren, but I have been their mother. After each birth, Aubrey, brilliant and exhausted, would announce she needed intensive therapy or a wellness retreat. She would leave for a week, and the weeks would curdle into months, and then she simply would not return. Caleb would be too busy closing a deal to notice. So I raised them. From the first bottle to the first day of kindergarten, I raised them all. This Tuesday morning. The kitchen light felt too bright, too early. The coffee wasn't even finished brewing when Caleb walked in, not bothering to knock. He slid a manila envelope onto my granite countertop. "Mum, I need you to look at this. It's urgent." I poured my coffee. Black. "What is it?" "Caleb." "It's Aubrey's startup. She's got a liquidity crunch, but the next round of funding is guaranteed. We just need to bridge her. $280,000. I looked at the clock. It was 7:15 in the morning. "And when do you need this bridge?" "By 5 p.m. today," he said, without a trace of shame. I took a sip. The coffee was bitter. "No." He sighed, that practiced, patient sound he'd perfected. "Mom, don't be difficult. We're a family. And this house," he gestured around my kitchen, "is in my name. Remember, we did that for tax optimization. You don't want to stand in the way of your grandchildren's future. Do you—" It was the same tone my late husband, Robert, used to use. The calm, rational phrasing just before he'd gamble away another mortgage payment. The implication that my caution was an emotional failing, an obstacle to greatness. I had spent 30 years of marriage learning to swallow my dissent. I thought I was done with that. As if summoned by the tension. Caleb's phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up and, with a broad smile, hit the speaker button. Aubrey's voice, bright and breathless, filled the room. "Caleb? Baby, tell your mom the good news. I just got the test back. I'm pregnant with number 4. I froze. My hand tightened on the warm ceramic mug. "And Mom?" Aubrey's voice cooed through the speaker. "Don't you worry about a thing. I know the last few times were hard, but this time is completely, totally different. Different." I turned my head and looked at the family calendar hanging by the refrigerator. It was covered in my handwriting. Nate's vaccination appointment on Thursday. Ruby's preschool tuition payment due Friday. The parent-teacher conference for Owen that Caleb had forgotten. The notation for which brand of sensitive skin formula to buy. I had handled every fever, every nightmare, every bill, for 3 children. Alone. Caleb was smiling, waiting for my congratulations. He gestured again at the envelope. See, it's an investment in the future. For all of us. I stopped listening. My world narrowed. My gaze drifted from the calendar, past the file cabinet stuffed with 7 years of receipts for diapers and doctor's visits, and landed on the small, round combination lock of my old document safe, hidden behind a framed photo of the grandchildren. An idea, cold and precise as a winter morning, began to form. Caleb left, confident, leaving the envelope on the counter. He assumed the pregnancy announcement was the closing argument. He assumed I would do what I always do, sign the check, absorb the cost, and keep the peace. He was wrong. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. I went to my office, unlocked the document safe, and pulled out my private ledger. Not the household budget, but the one I started 3 years ago, after Nate was born, and Aubrey's wellness retreat lasted 6 months. I opened the book. The numbers were my only allies. My accountant's handwriting, precise and unforgiving, catalogued every emergency. 45,000 for a bridge loan that never bridged. 20,000 for a down payment on a rental property that never materialized. 12,000 for a medical emergency for Aubrey that coincided perfectly with a luxury spa reopening. The total was staggering. Far more than the 280,000 he was asking for now. My hand was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, clear rage. I picked up my personal cell phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a year. Nora Whitfield. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, no nonsense. Sharp as glass. Nora, it's Margaret Doyle. A pause. Margaret. I wondered when you'd call. Let me guess. They're asking for money again. Nora was 64, an independent family lawyer who had handled my late husband's probate. She was the one who, years ago, had looked at a simple bank authorization Caleb asked me to sign and said, "Don't. This gives him too much access." I'd signed it anyway, wanting to prove I trusted my son. He wants $280,000 by 5 o'clock, I said. And Aubrey announced she's pregnant with number 4. The silence on the other end was heavy. Margaret, Nora said, her voice dangerously quiet. Give me 30 minutes and access to your accounts, the ones you gave me when Robert died. While I waited, I finally opened the envelope Caleb had left. It wasn't just a request. It was a pre-written guarantee contract. My fingers traced the signature line. It stated that in consideration for my continued family support for this 4th child, I agreed to assign my lifetime residency rights in this house, the right Robert had left me in his will, to offset the new debt. It was a trap. He hadn't just put the house in his name for tax optimization. He'd been setting this up. I looked at my own files. I pulled the hospital bills from Owen's birth, then Ruby's, then Nate's. All of them. Paid in full. Not by Caleb or Aubrey, but from my savings account. Nora called back in 20 minutes. He's been busy, she said. Her voice clipped. There's a business credit account opened 2 years ago under your social security number. It's linked to a shell company, Larkspur Holdings. That's Caleb's, I whispered. I know. He's been using it to pay interest on his short-term loans. The money you've been sending him for the kids' medical bills. It hasn't been going to doctors, Margaret. It's been going to phantom land deposits in Arizona, and I looked at his internal books, the ones he filed for Larkspur. Your payments, including those hospital bills you sent me scans of. He's been coding them all as gifts from Mom. He's been building a case to prove you never expected repayment. The air left my lungs. It wasn't just negligence. It was systematic. Here is what we do, Nora said, shifting from investigator to commander. We do not call him. We do not warn him. First, we freeze your credit with all 3 bureaus. Now. Second, I am drafting a revocation of that bank authorization, effective immediately. Third, we are moving every liquid asset you have out of your current bank and into a new account at Granite Ridge Credit Union, which I know for a fact does not have a branch within 100 miles of Pine Hollow. Fourth, we are establishing an irrevocable trust. We'll call it the Redwood Trust. A trust. For Owen, Ruby, and Nate. Nora clarified. It will be funded by you, with me as the trustee. This trust will pay for their documented needs only: schooling, medical, clothing, direct payments to the providers. Caleb and Aubrey will not see a single dollar in cash. Finally, I'm filing for a temporary financial protective order against both of them, citing elder exploitation. We have 1 day to do this before that 5 p.m. deadline alerts him that something is wrong. I looked at the guarantee contract on my desk, the line waiting for my signature. I picked up my pen, not to sign it, but to write on my own notepad. I wrote down the plan, and at the bottom, I added my own commitment, my new ledger: no cash for the adults, only direct funding for the children's needs via the trust. I hung up with Nora, the plan settling over me like a heavy blanket, but one that was finally warm. This wasn't just about the $280,000. It was about the 7 years they had already stolen, minute by minute. My mind drifted back. Owen, my first grandchild, had been 6 weeks old. Aubrey, looking thin and radiant in a white dress, kissed his head as she handed him to me. The diaper bag was packed. I just need a 1-week detox, Margaret, she'd said, her voice bright. Just to get my energy back. I'm no good to him like this. 1 week. That was 7 years ago. She returned, of course, for holidays and birthdays, always long enough for a flurry of photographs. But she never really came back. Owen stopped asking when she was coming home around the time he turned 4. Then came Caleb. He was an expert in promises. After Ruby was born, and Aubrey left for a yoga intensive in Costa Rica, the main plumbing line in the house backed up. Caleb insisted on hiring one of his ventures, a friend, rather than a licensed plumber. The bill was $8,000. Just cover it for now. Mom, he'd said, flashing that smile that used to melt me. I'll pay you back in full when the Henderson deal closes next month. The Henderson deal evaporated. When I called the contractor a month later about a leak, the number was disconnected. These weren't just financial entries in a ledger, they were physical debts, paid by my body. I remembered last winter, holding Ruby while she burned with a fever. It was 3 a.m, the house was cold, and I was walking the floor with her, humming the same song I had sung to Caleb. My neighbour, Mrs. Keating, must have seen the light on. She came over in her robe, holding a thermos of broth. She looked at me, my hair matted with sweat, and then at Ruby, finally asleep against my chest. Margaret, she said, her voice gentle. You're not the babysitter. You're her mother. All over again. I wanted to argue, but I was too tired. She was right. I was the mother. I was the one the school called when Nate, my youngest, fell and split his lip. I looked at the emergency contact sheet stuck to the refrigerator with a cartoon magnet. Contact number 1, Margaret Doyle. Contact number 2, Margaret Doyle. Mobile. Caleb and Aubrey were listed 3rd and 4th. If parents are unavailable. They were always unavailable. Being needed had felt like purpose. But now, I saw it for what it was. I was being used. As if on cue. My phone buzzed. A text from Aubrey. It wasn't an inquiry about the kids. It was a screenshot of an online Women in Investment Strategies certification program. The caption read, "This looks amazing, could really secure the kids' future." It was another bill, wrapped in the language of ambition. I looked up at the photograph on my desk. My late husband, Robert. He was smiling, holding Caleb on his shoulders. Robert, who loved grand gestures and leveraged dreams. Robert, who convinced me my accounting skills were just for small household things, yet always needed my small paycheck to cover his big losses. A sudden, sickening clarity washed over me. I had spent my entire adult life funding the lifestyles of people who refused to be responsible. I had traded the fear of being lonely for the certainty of financial slavery. I loved Owen, Ruby, and Nate with a fierceness that scared me. But loving them did not mean I had to destroy myself to enable their parents. I stood up and walked into the bathroom. I looked at the woman in the mirror, Margaret Doyle, 62 years old, exhausted. I practiced the word that had always stuck in my throat. No. My voice trembled. I cleared my throat and met my own gaze. No. It was steadier this time. It wasn't angry. It was final. The ledger was closed. I walked back to the office, picked up the phone, and dialed Nora. Nora, it's Margaret. Are you sure? She asked. Do it, I said. Freeze the credit, revoke the authorizations, set up the Redwood Trust, file the protective order. I'm leaving Pine Hollow tonight. The moment I hung up with Nora, the adrenaline hit. The quiet rage solidified into a precise, logistical calm. My former life as an accountant, the decades spent balancing books and managing deadlines, took over. Caleb wanted his money by 5 p.m. I would be gone by 4. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, I was logged into my computer, Nora on the line walking me through the interface. Experian first, she said. Click. Freeze. TransUnion? Click. Freeze. Equifax. Click. Freeze. The digital gates were closed. By 9:15, I was at our local bank, the one Caleb used. I walked past the familiar tellers and went straight to the notary. I handed her the revocation of power of attorney Nora had emailed me. The stamp came down with a satisfying, heavy thud. Caleb's access was severed. By 10:15, I was at a different bank across town, signing the incorporation documents for the Redwood Trust. I felt a pang of deep, aching love as I listed the beneficiaries: Owen Doyle, Ruby Doyle, Nathan Doyle. I set up the protocols Nora and I had discussed: direct, verified payments only. Tuition would go to the school. Medical bills would go to the doctor's office. Not a cent would pass through Caleb's or Aubrey's hands. At 11 o'clock, I initiated the wire transfers, my retirement fund, the savings I had painstakingly rebuilt after Robert's death. and my pension. It all moved. A lifetime of work flowing from Pine Hollow savings to the newly opened account at Granite Ridge Credit Union. I clicked the box, Go paperless, all statements via email only. The old house was now a financial black hole. At 12:40, I sat in the county courthouse, a place I had only ever been for jury duty. Nora had arranged an emergency hearing with Judge Calder, a woman with a reputation for spotting financial exploitation. I sat straight-backed as Nora presented the evidence, the credit card statements from Larkspur Holdings, the hospital bills I had paid, the gift memos from Caleb's files, and the new guarantee contract threatening my right to live in my home. Judge Calder read the contract, her expression hardening. He had his 62-year-old mother, the primary caregiver to his 3 children, sign away her residency to fund a startup. He attempted to, Your Honor, Nora corrected. She did not sign. Instead, she is here. The judge looked at me, her eyes sharp. Mrs. Doyle, is this what you want? I want my grandchildren to be safe, I said, my voice clear. I do not want to be an annuity for my son. She signed the temporary financial protective order. Caleb and Aubrey were legally barred from contacting me about finances, from accessing my new accounts, and from attempting to leverage my assets. At 1:30, I was back at the house. The children were at school and preschool. A security technician Nora had hired, a discreet man in a grey van, was already working. He installed new smart locks on every door, a system I could control from my new, clean phone. He installed 3 small, motion-activated cameras, one overlooking the front porch, one on the back door, and one in the main living area. They'll alert your phone and Ms. Whitfield's office instantly, he said. At 2:10, I sat at my kitchen counter, the same counter where Caleb had issued his demand. I typed out the letter Nora had drafted, a cold, formal document. It stated that all future communication must be in writing and CC'd to her legal office. It informed him that all parental financial support had ceased. It then detailed the existence of the Redwood Trust, explaining that all legitimate, documented needs for the children would be met. At 3 o'clock, I prepared the manila envelope, the same kind he had given me. Inside, I placed 3 items. First, a certified copy of the judge's protective order. Second, the single-page summary of the Redwood Trust, showing its purpose. Third, the guarantee contract he had left for me, untouched, with a $0 bank transfer receipt stapled firmly to the front. $0 for his $280,000 demand. At 3:30, the bus dropped Nate home. I met him at the door, my heart feeling like a stone in my chest. He was sleepy, rubbing his eyes. Upstairs, sweetie, I said. But he lifted his arms to me. I picked him up, his small body warm and familiar against my shoulder. I carried him to his room, the room I had set up just for him. I sat in the rocking chair, holding him while he drifted off to sleep, breathing in the smell of his hair one last time in this house. I laid him in his crib and placed his favorite teddy bear next to him. I tucked a small, tile-shaped AirTag tracker into the bear's seam, just in case. A risk I couldn't ignore. I walked downstairs, picked up my single suitcase, and did not look back. By 9 o'clock that night, I was 500 miles away in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The rental apartment Nora had arranged was small, clean, and blessedly silent. I was sitting on an unfamiliar sofa nursing a cup of tea, when my new phone buzzed. It was an alert from the security system. Motion detected at the front door of my old home. I opened the app. The timestamp showed 7:03 p.m. The porch light illuminated Caleb and Aubrey. They weren't using a key, they were hammering on the door. When it didn't open, Caleb used the key he still had, fumbling with the new smart lock, which, of course, no longer recognized it. She changed the locks. Aubrey's voice was a thin shriek, clear through the phone's microphone. I watched Caleb shoulder the door, his face purple with rage, before finally finding the spare key under the pot where I used to keep it, a key I had intentionally left. The camera feed for the living room flickered on. They burst in, Aubrey scanning the room wildly. "Where is she, Mom?" "She's gone," Caleb said, his voice flat. He'd seen the kitchen counter. It was scrubbed clean, except for the single manila envelope. I watched him tear it open. Aubrey stood beside him, clutching her stomach in a pantomime of distress. Caleb's face went from confusion to disbelief to a dark, cold fury. "What is it?" Aubrey demanded. It's a protective order," he stammered. She filed a protective order." He pulled out the next paper. "A Redwood Trust. It says the money is only for the kids." He crumpled the $0 receipt. Then he saw the last page, a simple, one-sheet ledger Nora had drawn up, summarizing 7 years of gifts that equaled the cost of a small college. The hospital bills for 3 births, the preschool tuitions, the emergency loans. That lying old... Aubrey started, but then her script kicked in. She abandoned us. She abandoned her family right when I'm pregnant. She's cruel. My old phone, the one I'd kept but turned on silent, began to light up. One call from Caleb, then another, a third, fourth, fifth. Then a string of texts, escalating from "Mum, what is this?" to "You'll regret this," to "Pick up the damn phone." My new phone buzzed with an email. It was Caleb, having realized the calls weren't working. Subject: "This is insane. Call me. We are your family." I opened a new draft, CCing Nora's office. Subject: "Re." "This is insane. Caleb." As stated in the documents, all future communication regarding finances or the children must be in writing. I will no longer be providing any cash support for adults. All legitimate, verified needs for Owen, Ruby, and Nate will be paid directly to the providers by the Redwood Trust. Do not contact me for private meetings. All requests must go through Nora Whitfield's office. Margaret. I hit send. The response was almost instantaneous, but not from Caleb. It was from Aubrey. Within an hour, a friend from Pine Hollow, one who knew the real story, sent me a screenshot. Aubrey had posted a long, tear-filled rant on social media. She wrote about her vulnerable 4th pregnancy and how her cruel, aging mother-in-law had stolen the children's security and abandoned the family in their darkest hour. Before I could even process the sting, my phone chimed with a new email. It was a forwarded message from Nora. Handled. Her one-word memo said. Below it was the cease and desist letter she had just sent to Aubrey, citing defamation and the penalties for violating a court order. Caleb's next email was different. The panic was gone, replaced by the familiar, cold superiority. You can't do this. Mom, I've already spoken to my lawyer. That house is in my name. You have no right to it. You need to return my $280,000, or I'll have you evicted. Nora replied to him directly, CCing me and his new lawyer. Mr. Doyle, Perhaps in your tax optimization, you forgot the codicil in your father's will. It grants Margaret Doyle irrevocable life tenancy in that property. You hold the title, but she holds the right. She cannot be evicted. However, as of this morning, she has willingly vacated. The property is now your full responsibility. The utility bills, I believe, are due on the 15th. The final blow came not from a lawyer, but from a busybody in town. Another screenshot, forwarded to me by the same concerned friend. This one wasn't from Aubrey's public page. It was a private message, leaked from her close friends list. It was a text from Aubrey to a girlfriend, sent 2 days ago. Girl, I'm just telling you, if this fourth baby trick doesn't get the old woman to cough up the 280, I'm done. I looked at the message, at the cold, transactional nature of her pregnancy. Caleb, unaware, sent one last, desperate email. Aubrey is pregnant. You are risking the health of your grandchild, I replied, my fingers steady on the keys. Nora. Caleb. I am not going to debate the existence or non-existence of a pregnancy. My position is unchanged. I am simply no longer funding the adults. Margaret. The line went silent. No more calls, no more emails. That, more than the shouting, worried me. The silence meant Caleb was thinking. He was planning another move. Caleb's silence lasted exactly 48 hours. But in that time, Nora's plan had moved from defense to offense. She had hired a private investigator, Ray Collins, a woman who specialized in financial forensics. She was, as Nora put it, a bloodhound with an accounting degree. Ray didn't disappoint. She quickly untangled the web of Larkspur Holdings. She found the digital application for the business credit line, submitted from Caleb's IP address using my social security number. But her real discovery was in his email server. She found a chain of messages between Caleb and a freelance bookkeeper. One email, dated a year ago, was the linchpin. Caleb had written, regarding the recent wire from M. Doyle, please log that as family gift, non-taxable. We need to keep the books clean and show intent. Show intent. He had been building a case to disown his debts all along. Nora forwarded the findings to the district attorney's economic crimes unit over in Mesa Vista, where Larkspur was registered. They confirmed they were opening a preliminary investigation. Back in Pine Hollow, the new reality was setting in. Without my income, the household machine ground to a halt. Aubrey, in a burst of performative motherhood, suddenly returned to her children. My neighbor, Mrs. Keating, called to warn me. For 2 days, Aubrey's social media was flooded with photos, Aubrey baking cookies with Ruby, Aubrey reading to Nate, Aubrey helping Owen with his homework. Ray Collins, however, was still watching. On the third night, at 11:50 p.m., Ray's surveillance camera, parked across the street, recorded Aubrey climbing into an Uber with an overnight bag, disappearing into the night. She hadn't even stayed long enough to see her perfect mother posts get traction. The real squeeze, however, was financial. With my credit frozen, the various high-interest payday loans Caleb had taken out in my name using that old power of attorney hit a wall. His short-term cash flow, the money he used to shuffle between bad bets, vanished. Then came his counter-move. It was a classic piece of his father's playbook project, your own sins onto your victim. A local sheriff served papers at Nora's office. Caleb had filed for a restraining order against me. He claimed I was mentally unstable, financially erratic, and had fled the state in a paranoid episode. abandoning my responsibilities. He claimed I was a danger to the children. The judge, seeing only the surface-level claims, had granted a temporary order. We had a formal hearing scheduled in 14 days. "He's trying to paint you as the villain," Nora said, her voice disgusted. "He'll argue for emergency guardianship of your finances, claiming you're incompetent." "Let him," I said. The words surprised me. A month ago, such a threat would have sent me spiraling, but I was not the same woman. My life in Santa Fe was quiet, but it was mine. I had taken a part-time job at a local quilting shop called the Silver Thread, just to be around colours and patterns, to do something with my hands that wasn't scrubbing or signing checks. 3 times a week. I attended a group therapy session for survivors of financial abuse. I was just, for the first time, learning to tell my own story. The children, for now, were in the house. Mrs. Keating was checking on them, and after Ray's report, social services had been alerted. They had paid a visit. Their initial report was blunt, no physical abuse, but clear-cut parental neglect. They were monitoring the situation daily. The pressure was clearly getting to Caleb. Ray's source inside the DA's office reported that Caleb had been interviewed. He had spent the entire hour blaming Aubrey. He claimed she was the one with the spending problem, that Larkspur was her idea, that he had been trying to protect his mother from Aubrey's demands. The alliance was fractured. Nora, smelling blood in the water, made her final move. "He's just given us the opening," she said. "He's admitted in a legal setting that he was aware of the financial misuse. His defense is to blame his wife. Good." She began drafting the civil suit, not just a defense, but an offense. A suit to demand full repayment for every dollar he had misappropriated, every loan in my name, every hospital bill he'd coded as a gift. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time, it was on my terms. A week after I vanished, the call I was both dreading and expecting finally came. It wasn't a blocked number or an angry text. It was a FaceTime request from Owen, pinging the tablet I had left him. I answered, my heart clenching. His small, 7-year-old face was too serious. He was sitting in his bedroom, the blue airplane wallpaper I'd put up looming behind him. "Grandma." "I'm here, sweetie." "Mum went on a business trip again," he said, his voice flat, reciting a line he had learned too well. "She left last night." I had to close my eyes for a moment. The sting of it, the cold confirmation. "I'm sorry. Owen, are you and Ruby and Nate okay?" Mrs. Keating brought pizza. A pause. "Grandma, why did you go away?" "To..." The question was a knife, and it was exactly the one Caleb and Aubrey were counting on. The guilt. But I would not lie to him. "I had to make sure you 3 were safe, honey." And I did. I set up a special account, just for you, Ruby, and Nate. It's called the Redwood Trust. It means your school is paid for, and the doctor is paid for, and you will always have what you need. That part will never, ever stop. He seemed to accept this. Then Ruby pushed her way into the frame, her face bright and oblivious. I drawed, "Grandma, look." She held up a piece of construction paper. On it were 4 crayon figures, drawn with the fierce, simple logic of a 5-year-old. A tall figure with grey hair, a medium figure, a smaller one, and the smallest one. "It's our house," she said proudly. "It's our house with 4 people. 4 people. Not 5. Not 6. My eyes burned. In her world, The people who were always leaving her parents were not part of the drawing. Family was not blood. Family was who stayed. The drawing settled my resolve. 2 days later, Nora called with news. "Margaret, the landscape has changed," she said. "Social services in Pine Hollow have officially opened a case between Mrs. Keating's reports and Ray's surveillance of Aubrey leaving the children alone. They have filed a neglect petition. They have an offer for you." "What offer?" "They are willing to petition the court for immediate temporary guardianship of all 3 children. To you." My breath hitched. Guardianship. But I'm in Santa Fe. That's the string. Margaret, you would have to return to Pine Hollow. You would have to move back into that house, under their supervision. The old panic clawed at my throat. "Nora, I can't. That house is a trap. Caleb's restraining order hearing is in 9 days. If I go back, he'll say I'm unstable. He'll say I fled and then returned. Just like his filing claims. He will try to use this to prove he's the stable one." "The risk is very real," Nora agreed, her voice hard. "He will absolutely try to twist this, but the court is offering you a shield. You wouldn't be returning as Caleb's mother, who he can bully. You would be returning as the court's appointed agent, and if he interferes, he'll be violating a court order, not just hurting your feelings." That night, I sat in the absolute silence of my Santa Fe apartment. I thought about the peace I had found at the silver thread quilt shop, the quiet strength I felt in my therapy group. I was being asked to trade that peace for the center of the storm. I looked at the photo of Ruby's drawing on my phone. 4 people. The central question of my life, the one I had been asking in therapy, hung in the air: can I love without self-destructing? For my entire marriage to Robert, the answer had been no. For 7 years with Caleb, the answer had been no. My love had always meant my erasure. It meant setting myself on fire to keep them warm. But this was different. This was not about saving Caleb. This was not about rescuing Aubrey. This was about saving Owen, Ruby, and Nate. My old self would have rushed back in, checkbook open, and been devoured. My new self, the one who had learned to read a ledger of abuse, made a different choice. I picked up the phone. "Nora," I said, my voice steady. "We are going to take the middle path. I will return, but not on Caleb's terms, and not even on the court's terms. On our terms. We will go back with a legal fortress." We worked for the next 48 hours. We drafted a 90-day care plan. It was not a plea. It was a contract. It outlined a budget for food, utilities, and clothing, funded entirely by the Redwood Trust, with every receipt to be submitted to Nora. It included mandatory schedules for developmental therapy for Nate, art therapy for Ruby, and counseling for Owen. Nora sent this plan to Caleb's lawyer with an ultimatum. "Mr. Doyle has 2 options," she wrote. "CCing me? Option A, he and Ms. Lane will sign this stipulated agreement. They consent to Margaret returning as temporary guardian for 90 days. They agree to vacate the Pine Hollow property for that duration. They agree to enroll in mandatory parenting classes and financial counseling. Option B, they refuse, and at the restraining order hearing in 9 days, we will present the full evidence of the economic crimes, the faked pregnancy, the child neglect, and the DA's investigation, and we will petition to have their parental rights permanently reviewed." Aubrey, predictably, was silent. Caleb, his lawyer later told Nora, exploded. He threatened. He screamed. He promised to burn me to the ground, but his lawyer, who had seen the file, was not paid to be emotional. He had seen the email about the gifts. He had seen the texts about the fake pregnancy. He knew the DA was circling. He told Caleb, in no uncertain terms, that if he chose option B, he would not just lose the house, he would lose his children. Late Friday afternoon, the signed stipulation arrived in Nora's inbox. I booked my flight. I was preparing to return to Pine Hollow. I was not going back to save my son. I was going back to save my grandchildren. And this time, I was armed with the law. The Summit County Courthouse was not designed for comfort. It was all hard wood, high ceilings, and the stale smell of recycled air. I sat beside Nora, my hands folded on my lap. Across the aisle, Caleb and Aubrey sat with their lawyer. Caleb was vibrating with suppressed energy, his knee bouncing. Aubrey, for her part, was pale, dressed in a muted grey suit, the picture of a concerned, wronged mother. This hearing was supposed to be about the restraining order Caleb had filed against me. Nora, however, had filed a counter-motion for the emergency guardianship. Judge Calder had merged the two. Caleb's lawyer, a slick man named Harrison, went first. He painted a portrait of a senile, vindictive woman. My client's mother, Mrs. Doyle, has unfortunately entered a state of confusion, Harrison said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. She is being manipulated by predatory counsel. He nodded at Nora. Who has convinced her to liquidate her life savings and abandon her family? Mr. Doyle is here simply to protect his mother from herself and to ensure the stability of his 3 young children. I kept my eyes on Judge Calder. She was reading the file, her expression unreadable. When it was Nora's turn, she stood. She did not raise her voice. She simply presented the ledgers. Your Honor, we are not here to discuss Margaret Doyle's mental state. We are here to discuss her checkbook, which she has managed with perfect clarity for 40 years. Exhibit O, the stack of invoices from Pine Hollow General Hospital. 3 births, all paid in full by checks signed Margaret Doyle. Exhibit B, 7 years of tuition receipts from the children's preschool and elementary school, all paid by Margaret Doyle. Exhibit C, the financial forensics report from Ray Collins detailing the Larkspur Holdings account, opened using my social security number, and the 2 years of interest payments that matched the emergency funds I had given Caleb for the children. Harrison objected. This is irrelevant to my client's petition. It is entirely relevant, Judge Calder said, her voice cutting through the room. He is claiming she is financially incompetent. Ms. Whitfield is presenting evidence of systemic financial exploitation against her. Proceed, Ms. Whitfield. Nora then called her witnesses. First, Mrs. Allen, the principal at Owen's school. In your professional experience, Mrs. Allen, who is the primary caregiver for Owen Doyle? Margaret Doyle, the principal said, without hesitation. She is the only one we have ever dealt with. She attends every conference. She packs his lunch. She is the first and only emergency contact we ever successfully reach. Next, Dr. Breen, the pediatrician. He confirmed the same. He had not seen Caleb or Aubrey in his office for over 6 years. Caleb was bright red, whispering furiously to Harrison. Then Nora played her final card. The court must understand the crisis that forced Mrs. Doyle to take these drastic steps, Nora said. Mr. Doyle demanded $280,000 for a startup related to his wife's fourth pregnancy. An act of desperation to protect her family, Harrison countered. An act of fraud, Nora said. She presented the final exhibit, the screenshot of Aubrey's text message. If this fourth baby trick doesn't get the old woman to cough up the 280, I'm done. A heavy silence fell. Judge Calder read the text. She read it again. Then she looked up, her eyes finally landing on Aubrey. Aubrey, who had been practicing her look of maternal distress, seemed to shrink, her face crumbling. Caleb saw the shift. He saw the case evaporating. He jumped to his feet, knocking his chair back. This is character assassination. We needed that money. My wife is pregnant, and my mother abandoned us if she had just paid the $280,000 like she was supposed to. Mr. Doyle. Harrison snapped, trying to pull him down, but the admission was out, hanging in the air. Judge Calder held up a hand. Thank you. Mr. Doyle, you've just confirmed the entire motive of Ms. Whitfield's case. She looked at Harrison. Your client just testified, under oath, that this entire affair is because his mother refused to pay him $280,000. Is that correct? Caleb's face was ashen. He knew he had made a fatal error. Aubrey, realizing what had just happened, let out a single, sharp sob. Her lawyer, a young woman who had been silent the entire time, stood up. Your Honor, she said, her voice shaking slightly. In light of information just revealed, I must respectfully petition to withdraw as counsel for Ms. Lane. Granted, Judge Calder said, striking her gavel. The ruling was immediate. The restraining order filed by Mr. Doyle is dismissed with prejudice. The petition for temporary guardianship is granted to Margaret Doyle for 90 days. Mr. Doyle and Ms. Lane are barred from any unsupervised contact with the children. All financial support will continue only through the Redwood Trust. A civil hearing for the recovery of assets is scheduled for next month. Judge Calder looked at me. Furthermore, I am forwarding this entire file, including the evidence of the fraudulent credit application and the conspiracy to extort, to the district attorney's office. This court will not tolerate elder abuse. Mr. Doyle. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I sat perfectly still. When it was over, I felt Nora's hand on my arm. I realized I was gripping my purse so hard my knuckles were white. Inside the purse was a small, folded piece of paper. Ruby's drawing of the four of us. The only thing that mattered. The children were, for now, stable. I walked out of the Summit County Courthouse with the guardianship order in my hand, but I felt no triumph. Nora walked beside me, her face grim. You won the battle, Margaret, she warned, as we stepped into the harsh sunlight. But you did not win the war. A legal victory is not the same as personal safety. Caleb is cornered. He has lost his financial leverage, and now he has lost his children. He will not go quietly. He will harass you. She was right. The order was paper. Caleb was rage. I did not spend 90 days in the Pine Hollow house. I did not even spend one night. Armed with the court order, I drove straight there with a police escort. I packed 3 small suitcases for the children. I gathered their medical records and their favorite toys. I buckled them into my car, and I drove the 500 miles back to Santa Fe. The next morning, I signed a 12-month lease on the small, clean apartment. This was no longer a hideout. It was a home. I enrolled Owen in a weekend Lego robotics club. I found an art therapist for Ruby, someone to help her process the 4 people in her drawings. I found a neighborhood playgroup for Nate. I was building a new life, brick by brick, far from the toxic rot of Pine Hollow. The desperation, as Nora predicted, began immediately. Aubrey, having lost her legal standing, fell back on her only asset performance. Ray Collins, whom Nora had kept on retainer, sent me a link. It was a social media live stream. Aubrey, sitting in her empty kitchen, weeping. She spoke of her kidnapped children, stolen by a confused, vindictive old woman. She clutched her still flat stomach, mourning the stress being put on her high-risk 4th pregnancy. She ended by begging for donations for a legal fund to bring her babies home. An hour later, Ray sent a second file. This one was not public. It was a screen recording captured by one of Aubrey's friends. The live stream was over. The camera was shaky, but the audio was clear. Aubrey was counting a stack of $20 bills from the donation app, laughing. "The 4th baby trick still pays. Girl," she said to someone off screen. "They're so stupid." Caleb's desperation was less theatrical and more dangerous. The banks, no longer pacified by my frozen credit, were calling in his notes. Larkspur Holdings was insolvent. The protective order barred him from contacting me, so he went after the next closest target. My neighbor, Mrs. Keating, called me. She was crying. "Margaret, he was here," she whispered. "It was midnight. He was banging on my door, screaming. He said I helped you steal his children and that I would pay for it." I called the police. A formal police report was filed. Caleb had just violated the terms of Judge Calder's protective order. "We have him," Nora said when I called her. "We can have him arrested for contempt. Or we can use this to end it." I chose to end it. The next morning, from my new kitchen table in Santa Fe, I prepared one last envelope. I sent it by certified overnight courier to the Pine Hollow house, addressed directly to Caleb. Inside, there were no pleas. There were only 2 documents. The first was an unconditional release of surety, a document Nora had drafted that severed my name, my credit, and my financial existence from every loan or debt he had ever attached me to. The second document was the real blade. It was a formal legal notice activating my rights of life tenancy to the Pine Hollow house. I was not asking him to leave. I was informing him that, as the holder of the life tenancy, and given his documented harassment and violation of a court order on that property's premises, he was now the one trespassing. I was legally taking possession. Beneath the documents, I included one final cold accounting statement. It contained only 2 lines: ongoing financial support for Caleb Doyle and Aubrey Lane, $0. Ongoing financial support for Owen, Ruby, and Nate, 100%. The package was delivered at 10 in the morning. At 10:01, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It was Aubrey. "If you don't reverse this, if you don't pay what you owe, I'm serious. I'm leaving the 4th one with you. You think you won, you'll be raising 4. I read the text. It was the last, pathetic rattling of an empty tin can. I looked across my small, quiet living room. Owen and Ruby were on the floor, building a lopsided tower. Nate was asleep on the sofa, clutching his teddy bear. They were safe. The answer was clear. I did not reply to Aubrey. I called Nora. "They received the packet?" I said. "They are threatening me again." "Good," Nora said. "That's the final piece?" I took a deep breath. "Issue the statement." That afternoon, Nora's office released a short, formal notice to Caleb's lawyer and the court, finalizing my position. It simply said, Margaret Doyle will be leaving. Monday morning, 7:30. The children were just finishing cereal when the pounding started. It wasn't a knock. It was the flat, angry sound of a fist on my apartment door. I looked at the security feed. Caleb and Aubrey, both looking like they hadn't slept, vibrating with rage. Mum, open this door. We know you're in there, Caleb shouted, his voice muffled. I walked to the intercom and pressed the button to unlock the lobby. Come up. I opened my apartment door. They stormed in, ready to confront me, but stopped dead. Standing in my small entryway, looking perfectly calm, were two Santa Fe police officers, a county social worker, and Nora Whitfield. What is this? Caleb demanded, his eyes wide, realizing he had walked into a trap. Mr. Doyle, Ms. Lane, thank you for coming, Nora said, her voice like ice. You've saved us the trouble of serving you. You can't do this. These are our children. Aubrey shrieked, moving toward the kitchen. The social worker, a tall woman with tired eyes, stepped in her path. Ma'am, we're here by order of the court. Nora held up a tablet. The face of Judge Calder appeared via a secure video link. Mr. Doyle, Ms. Lane. The judge's voice boomed. This is an emergency hearing regarding the welfare of your children. This is ridiculous, Caleb said, trying to regain his footing. My mother is unstable. She kidnapped my children. Is that why you sent her this email? Nora asked, holding up a certified copy of his gift instructions to the bookkeeper. Instructing your staff to log your mother's payments as gifts to defraud her of repayment. Caleb's colour drained. And Ms. Lane, Nora continued, turning to Aubrey. Is this your high-risk fourth pregnancy? She held up the screenshot of the text message. If this fourth baby trick doesn't get the old woman to cough up the 280, I'm done. Aubrey looked like she had been struck. I have seen enough. Judge Calder's voice cut through the silence. Based on the evidence of extortion, documented child neglect, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud, I am issuing an emergency order. Margaret Doyle's temporary guardianship is hereby extended to 12 months. Mr. Doyle, you will enroll in mandatory financial ethics counseling. Ms. Lane, you will enroll in mandatory parenting classes. Any violation, any missed class, any unauthorized contact with Mrs. Doyle, and your visitation rights will be permanently terminated. Do you understand me? Caleb stared, mute, his world collapsing. I stepped forward. I looked at one of the officers. Officer, this is the key to my property in Pine Hollow, Colorado. My lawyer has the filed paperwork. My life tenancy is being enforced. Mr. Doyle is to be removed from the premises immediately for harassment. The officer took the key. It was done. Then, I looked at Caleb. I held out one last, white envelope. He took it, his hand trembling. He tore it open. There was no money. There were no legal threats. There was only a single photograph, taken 2 days ago at a small park in Santa Fe. Owen, Ruby, and Nate, sitting on a swing set, squinting and laughing into the sun. On the back, I had written 5 words. Family is who stays. Aubrey saw the picture. She saw the game was over. She let out a sharp gasp. Her eyes rolled back, and she crumpled to the floor, clutching her stomach. The baby, she wailed. You're stressing me. The baby, It was her final, pathetic performance. But we were prepared. The social worker, anticipating this, had EMTs waiting in the hallway. They rushed in and began checking her vitals. One of the EMTs looked up at the social worker. Her blood pressure is 120/80. Pulse is normal. Ma'am, he said, looking at Aubrey. Are you currently pregnant? Yes, 4 months. She sobbed from the floor. The EMT shook his head slightly. Her abdomen is non-gravid. There are no clinical signs of pregnancy. We're noting this evaluation for the court record. The last lie. It just hung in the air, pathetic and transparent. Caleb saw it. He saw the EMT's face. He saw the empty keyring in the officer's hand. He saw the picture of his children, laughing without him. And he broke. It was not a yell. It was a roar. He lunged, not at me, but at the empty chair where Nora had been sitting, grabbing it and raising it high. You old bitch. He never finished the motion. The 2 officers were on him instantly, tackling him to the floor. He fought, but they were trained for this. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed in the small room. Caleb Doyle, you are under arrest for violating a court order and felony assault, the officer said, hauling him to his feet. They dragged him past me. He wouldn't look at me. Aubrey sat on the floor, weeping real tears, for the first time the tears of a failed con artist. I turned my back on them. I walked into the kitchen, where my 3 grandchildren were quietly watching. Owen, Ruby, get your backpacks. I lifted Nate, sleepy and warm, onto my hip. He wrapped his small arms around my neck. I grabbed Ruby's hand. Owen held onto the back of my coat. I walked the 4 of them out of the apartment, past the police, past the social worker, past the wreckage of my son's life. We stepped into the elevator. I pressed the button for the lobby. I stared straight ahead at the closing doors, my face perfectly, finally, calm. This wasn't running away. This was the final, non-negotiable boundary. The doors slid shut, sealing us off from the noise, the demands, and the endless, bottomless pit of their need, leaving it all behind and opening up a quiet life, one that I, and these 3 children, would finally decide for ourselves. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're all tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.